Hello everyone and welcome to another I Picked My Butt video. More Survivor.io and the 20% revival effect from the S grade belt. What's it actually do? What's it increasing? Well, this whole time I've kind of just assumed that it's an increase to attack, increase to movement speed, and an increase in health. But today we're going to actually go in and test it out. Now there's one of three ways this can go. Is we're going to get 20% added onto the 15% attack, which will give us 35% additional attack inside the game. The second scenario is we're going to get 20% of that 15%, mean we're going to get an additional 3% on top of the 15%, giving us an increased attack of 18% after death. And then the final scenario is it's going to do nothing at all to our attack damage. So my thought process for the testing on this is to remove most of my gear. We'll have to leave some of the attack stuff on so we're doing enough damage, but pretty much just going in with the Eternal suit on. And we'll take attack measurements before we die, after our first death, and after our second death. Then we'll equip the waist guard on and do the same thing before we die, after we die, and then after the second death. So in order to make sure we're seeing a difference with the S grade belt equipped and not equipped, we need to make sure we're doing over 33,000 damage, because we're going to be seeing numbers increase at 1k, attacking that high. So if we were at 100,000 damage and we got a 3% increase, we might see something like 103%. So we're more focused on a third of that. We just want to see even a 1% increase just to really see the difference. So that's where the 33,000 is coming from. So after several runs of me trying different weapons and different gear to try to see what my numbers would be without getting too many upgrades inside the game, I realized it's best to just go in with the Trendy Charm maxed out and my S grade Eternals. And obviously, as you saw, we do have the Eternal suit on, but we don't have the S grade belt. And our very first hit we're doing for numbers before we die is going to be 40k. And after our first death, surprisingly, that 15% does apply, and that 40k goes up to 46k, which is exactly a 15% increase. Now, after the second death, we're actually doing 52k in damage. And I thought to myself at this point, are we actually doing 15% on top of the 46k, or are we doing 30% increase on top of the 40k? Just to explain a little bit better, if we were doing a 30% increase on 40k, we would be seeing a number of 52k. If we saw a 15% increase on the 40k, brings us to 46, and then another 15% on top of 46, it would bring us to 52.9k. And this game doesn't round up at all, so that's where we would still see the 52k. But to make it a lot easier to understand, if we kept on looking at that 40k and throwing 15% on that, we would be seeing 58k after that last revival there that we used the token for, or we would be seeing 60k like we are. So every time the attack increases, we're going to be seeing a 15% increase off that highest attack. So now we'll finally go in, throw that Eternal belt on, and see if we can find any difference. Just to confirm, we're at the same benchmark. Before we die, we're still doing 40,000 damage. So after our first death, unfortunately, we're still seeing 46k. And after the second death, 52k. And third death, 60k. And if we did actually get even that 3% increase, we would have seen 47.2k after our first death. So it doesn't look like this has any impact at all on our attack damage or our movement speed. So this means that that 20% revival effect is just going to affect our health inside the game. And seeing how we don't actually have a number underneath our health bar or even little notches to kind of show on it, there's really no good way to actually show you that. But given that the attack was a solid 15% on there, I think we could pretty much assume that it's going to be a 20% increase on the health every time you die. But with that being said, I still believe if you're going into Ender's Echo, the S grade belts are still your best bet given the stats of all of them. But if you're playing a normal chapter, you might want to decide something like the stylish belt might be more beneficial than just grabbing some 20% worth of health. But I'm really curious to know what you guys think of this and what you would consider the best belt inside the game and what you're going to run inside your chapters. Let me know in the comments below. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and remember, I picked my butt.